Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, ranking the position groups for this LSU program heading into 2024. And, we always kind of start these episodes with some broad takeaways. And I think one of my broadest takeaways is that everybody wants to talk about the question marks on this LSU roster heading into 2024, the defensive line, the defense as a whole. Nobody wants to talk about there are certain parts of this LSU roster that are elite, right? Obviously, the offensive line, we're going to talk about that. There are aspects to be really fired up about for this LSU program. And if this defense takes a step in the right direction, which we all think it will under Blake Baker, just from a coaching level standpoint, this is going to be a dangerous team in the SEC, fired up to get into my rankings. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. A lot of different ways you can go about stacking these position groups. I learned a ton from you guys in the comment section. The best part about doing this is just talking ball with you guys. So I would love to hear some of your input. I got some hot takes that I'll kind of include throughout as we rank these position groups. I would love to hear how you guys are feeling about some of those takes. And without further ado, let's get into the number one position group. That's the offensive line. And you look at the offensive line, two things really fire me up. One, let's start with a hot take. I think DJ Chester is an upgrade at the center spot. Redshirt freshman, former top 50 national prospect. DJ Chester was one of my favorite offensive linemen coming out in the 2023 cycle. He comes into a perfect spot where you're returning the all four offensive linemen around you. This is a very, very talented center that can do a lot of different things. You return four starters from an elite offensive line group in 2023. You potentially upgrade the center position. So from a personnel standpoint, this is an elite group, right? You have two offensive tackles that I think very well could be first-round NFL draft picks in 8 months. But I think what really makes me excited about this unit is you look across college football, a lot of programs have questions from just a personnel standpoint on the offensive line. But I think a lot of the other questions that not enough people talk about is the chemistry on the offensive line. We saw a Michigan offensive line in 2023 truly be elite because a lot of those offensive linemen had played multiple years together. You look at this LSU offensive line heading into 2024, not only is there that legitimate NFL draft talent on the offensive line, you have the chemistry built in with this unit. These guys have taken so many snaps together on the offensive line. When you start combining chemistry, coaching, and personnel, that's when you have a special unit. I don't know if there's a better offensive line in the country than LSU heading into 2024, going into my number two position group, and potentially a little bit of a hot take. And we are going to need to do a little bit projecting. I think there's a lot of fans who might not be LSU fans listening to this and say, how are you going to put the wide receiver room as the number two position on this football team when they lose two first-round NFL draft picks? I think a lot of LSU fans would answer, there's a lot of talent in this room, whether it's coming through from the transfer portal, whether it was already on this roster. LSU has shown the ability to develop wide receivers just about as good as anybody in the country. We're also going to throw in the tight end position in this position group with Mason Taylor. You look at Chris Hilton Jr., Kyron Lacey, probably going to be at least 700-plus yard receivers for LSU. You bring in C.J. Daniels, who could have been a day 3 NFL draft pick coming from Liberty, decides to come to LSU. You have two just X factors in my mind in Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas. And what excites me about both of those cats is you look at LSU, what were they so excellent at in 2023 was getting the ball to playmakers in space. I look at Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas, two young cats that are only going to their third year of the college football landscape. These two kids are dynamite with the football in their hands. They're not necessarily the most polished route runners at the wide receiver spot. You have guys like that in Lacey and Hilton Jr. I look at Xavier Thomas and Aaron Anderson as, hey, get the football into their hands a couple times a game. You can find some game-changing plays with both of those wide receivers. This is a wide receiver room that's going to be really, really good in 2024. Going to my number 3 position group and potentially another hot take, the linebacker spot. I think one thing that I am most excited for is just how they use Harold Perkins in a little bit more effective manner. I felt like as a freshman, they kind of took the leash off him and let him really impact the game at a high level. And I feel like as a sophomore, They put the leash on him and didn't really put him in positions where he can be truly one of the best players on the defensive side of the football across the country. I don't know exactly how it's going to look. That's why I don't get paid the money that Blake Baker gets paid to come to Baton Rouge. I have full confidence that Blake Baker is going to figure out the best way to use Harold Perkins Jr. He is one of, if not the best player on defense in the country heading into 2024. And then you start sprinkling in some other names. Whit Weeks played really good football as a true freshman. Greg Penn III has played a ton of football and a linebacker that you just kind of trust. I look at this linebacker room and say, not only the potential, but a lot of these guys have played good football for LSU in the past. This can be a really, really good group for LSU on the defensive side of the football. Going to number 4, and maybe a little bit low for LSU fans. And I kind of wanted to highlight why I like the linebacker room so much. Let's go to the quarterback room. Garrett Nussmeier. I think, again, on the outside, there will be a lot of college football fans who aren't LSU fans looking at LSU at the quarterback spot and saying they're going to take a step back. And that might be true from a Heisman quarterback in Jaden Daniels. The step back is not nearly going to be as extreme as people are expecting. Garrett Nussmeier, at least in my mind, projecting him in 2024, is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. And I think what excites is we've seen Garrett Nussmeier play at an extremely high level. When he came in against Georgia in the SEC championship game in 2022, played some really good football. When he came and won the bowl game against Wisconsin, put up a ton of yards. Garrett Nussmeier has shown the ability to be an elite quarterback at the college football level. Now it's the full offseason that he's the quarterback one behind an elite offensive line with elite wide receivers. I look at Garrett Nussmeier and say he's going to put up some massive numbers in this LSU offense. Going into number 5, I have the running back room. I think the big question we have in the running back room is just the depth. Now, there's a couple of names that really excite me. Caleb Jackson going into his sophomore year. We saw the flashes of a potential running back that can be one of the better ball carriers in the SEC. You have true freshman Caden Durham coming in, who, again, only enrolls in the summer, so you didn't get to see him in spring. That probably hurts his ability to get playing time early. What we know about Caden Durham is he's one of the fastest players in all of college football. Behind a good offensive line that is going to be able to get Caden Durham to the second level pretty often. Caden Durham probably doesn't get many more than 10-plus carries a game, if that. When he has the football in his hands, he can kind of have those game-changing plays. Was one of my favorite running backs in the 2024 class. I look at Caden Durham behind an offensive line that's going to let him operate in space and say he could be a potential year-one guy for LSU. And again, Josh Williams, solid. Caleb Jackson, I think, could be really good. Running back 3, 4, 5, probably some question marks. But if you can get some big-time performances from Caden Durham, I think you're really excited about what this running back room could look like. Just question marks about the depth and the amount of capable ball carriers that we have on this roster. Going to number 6, the secondary, I think the most fascinating conversation to have around this LSU team. One, Blake Baker, proven to be a very, very good developer of talent in the back end. And what kind of separates the defensive line and the secondary, 2 units that struggled massively in 2023, is from a personnel standpoint, I kind of have a lot of confidence in the secondary. I just think they were really poorly coached. I look at Ashton Stamps. I look at a potential freshman like Deshaun McBride or PJ Woodland, who got a lot of buzz. You have Javion Toviano. You have some veterans like Sage Ryan and Major Burns. You have Zy Alexander coming back from injury, J.K. Johnson. We just named, 7, 8 guys that we feel, pretty good about in terms of being quality SEC football players. Now the question is, can you figure out what the right recipe is for the secondary in 2024? And I think the difference between the secondary and the defensive line is, we'll talk about the defensive line. You have just a little bit more question marks about the personnel. Do we have enough good players on the defensive line? Where I look at the secondary and say, hey, the talent is there. I think there's a reason that LSU was not desperate to add names in the transfer portal at the secondary spot, because they feel like they have the talent necessary to be a good unit. Now it's just all got to come together. You have a nice combination of some experience, guys like Sage Ryan, and then some young cats, guys like Javion Toviano, PJ Woodland. Can this unit come together? That's the question mark you have. Number 7, defensive line. Now, There are some guys that really intrigue me, right? I think Braden Swinson played really good football for LSU in 2023, was probably their best pass rusher outside of Harold Perkins in the 2023 season. Deshaun Womack going into year two. Probably didn't see what you wanted to see from him year one, but that's kind of to be expected from true freshmen along the line of scrimmage in the SEC. Savion Jones, a guy that has some talent, Paris Shand as well. Do they have that high upside difference maker on the defensive line? That's one of the questions. And I think number two, the question is, do they just have enough depth? You look at trying to beat a team like Georgia or Alabama or win late in November, you got to be deep along the defensive line. We have some question marks about the depth. I think one of the key names to keep an eye on is true freshman Dominic McKinley. If he can come in and be a guy that is an impact maker, not necessarily a starter, but being a guy that's a reliable piece of the rotation for LSU, personally, that makes me feel better about the depth. And that's the question I have for LSU is that we kind of know that they're not going to be an elite defensive line because they probably just don't have those top-end difference makers. I think they're collecting them on the recruiting trail, but probably not going to be there in 2024. It's okay if this defensive line is not top 10 in the country. I'm more concerned about it being a liability. And if it can just not be a liability, a quality average unit in the SEC, this LSU team, it can win a lot of football games because, again, I have confidence in the linebacker room. I got some confidence in the secondary. Can the defensive line just kind of hold their own and find some ways to impact the football game? That's the question mark. And I think a lot of those conversations have to do with depth and some of this young talent kind of taking that step, whether it's true freshman Dominic McKinley, whether it's second-year kid Deshaun Womack. That's how I view this LSU roster. Again, I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. A lot of different ways you could go about stacking these position groups. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.